Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Simon Walker here, and we've got Jonas here too. I'm Director of Training at Maxon, and Jonas is one of our fantastic trainers and all-round experts in fact of many things, but especially today we've got such an amazing thing to share with you. Hey Jonas, how you doing?
Hi, well, I'm good. Happy to share stuff with you.
Absolutely. We've got quite a bit to get through, so we probably will overrun by a few minutes on the hour mark. But bear with us because Jonas has got some absolutely fantastic stuff to share, all sorts of things for motion tracking and different workflows. And I posted in the chat area some of the project files and the footage that Jonas has kindly shared with us, so you can download that. We'll talk more about the After Effects project when we get to it, or rather Jonas will, and that's a hefty download, but there were so many requests for it on our last session, so that thank you for sharing that with us, Jonas. Appreciate it. And thanks for uploading it so quickly.
Yeah, no worries.
Cool.
It's a gigabyte size, so it can take a while to download it, but it includes all of the footage and yeah, it's the consolidated project. So everything's
fantastic.
In there.
Excellent. And just a reminder, I know that you know this if you've joined us before, but these sessions are recorded and you'll get the link automatically after the event. Here's another thing that's good to look out for, this page I'm sharing, which is the Cineversity main page. And if you click on the area that says quick tips, then you get even more of Jonas's fantastic training distilled into short little sessions. So that's definitely something to check out too. And that's all on demand. So I'll put that link into the notes too as well. And also just a reminder, here's the last little bit of housekeeping. This PDF, which we've been sharing with the login links to watch the sessions, has the links for yesterday's sessions. So the links act as links to the recordings after the event. So you can just click on those and then watch the sessions from yesterday's if you missed it. And also we're running another session, kind of the third in these three that Jonas has put together on Friday this week. And in the PDF, you can then register for those too. And I'll post the link to the PDF in the chat window too. And if any of those don't work, please feel free to contact us, training@maxon.net, and we can send you those links manually. Fantastic. So hello to everyone. Also, we've got a link to all the footage that we were sharing yesterday, a couple of requests for that. So I'll put that into the questions box, but please feel free to jump in with questions as we're going along. And hello to Darren also for hiding behind the scenes and helping us answer all the questions. Thanks, Darren.
Thanks a lot, man.
Yes, so let me hand over to you, Jonas.
Yep.
Okay, here we go.
Here we go, and now you should see a nice little keynote. Do you see that? Fantastic.
Certainly do.
Today, in the second session, we will be talking more about motion tracking workflows, this time almost completely inside of Cinema 4D. And we will focus on manual tracking as well as object tracking. So we're also going to break down this scene a little bit, and I will show you how I track that. And yeah, let's just dive in because we already know that we're going to overrun. So manual tracking. We've got an auto tracker. What do we need manual tracking for then? So it's pretty simple. Sometimes a shot cannot be tracked automatically. This might be because of motion blur or because of many things, hiding other stuff in the background and so on. And for those cases, it's good to support the automatic tracker with manual trackers, for example. So this is one thing you need to know, and I will also show that in a minute, that you can combine manual and automated tracking. So you can enhance the automated tracking. They can be combined. That's important. And the second thing where you really need it for is object tracking. So you cannot solve an object without manual tracking. You need manual tracking for that. All right. Again, maybe you watched the webinar yesterday, so you might be familiar with that slide here. I want to give you some hints to what you can think of before you shoot. And one thing is placing markers. So again, here in those areas where you have got a lot of detail in the surface here, you don't need markers because there is enough for the tracker to hold on or to stick to and to follow. But in these areas here where we just have plain white or gray color, the tracker cannot stick to something. So you need markers so the tracker can follow something. And also the same here where I placed some trackers for the object solve later. But keep in mind that trackers need to be removed in compositing. That's important because you need to find the right balance of having enough trackers or enough markers and having to remove them later, because this is also something that takes time. And the second one is set and object documentation. And what I mean by saying that is that you really need to take measures. And this is especially important when you have a combined tracking shot like this one, where you solve the camera as well as an object. So the measures need to be right. And it also helps to include the camera data in your measurements. And most importantly, the focal length. So if you know the focal length of your camera and of that shot, this is already really helpful. Okay, here are some good to knows that I will dive into regarding manual tracking. And the first thing is pretty much the same as in automated tracking. Always track image sequences. I showed it yesterday. What can happen if you track video footage because of varying frame rates. You might have double frames inside of Cinema 4D, and this is something you really want to avoid. So make sure you throw your footage into After Effects, turn it into an image sequence, render it out, and use that for tracking. Then never track reflections and refractions because they simply never match the direction of something you actually want to track. And don't track features too far in the background. This is because like a distance of 1 pixel can be like 10 meters if it's very far away or even more. And if you track features too far in the background, the chance is higher that you introduce some, well, jittering in your track or in your solve. Don't track corners of objects. That's also very important, and I will show you an example of that also in a few minutes. And if possible, track all 3 dimensions. So if you have just a ground plane, don't just track the ground plane. Try to find some areas in the footage that are not on the ground plane, but that you have the 3rd dimension in there. That also helps. It's not always possible, but it helps if you can do that. All right, yeah, keeping all of that in mind, let's start tracking some footage, and I will directly jump into Cinema 4D. This is the startup layout. Yesterday I already showed that you can adjust the layout to be the motion tracker layout. Now you have everything that you need for motion tracking in here. Double click here to create a motion tracker object. Here we got it. Double click again to select the footage. And I'm going to go to manual tracking, the Canyon footage, and here we go. I will resample the whole thing to 50%, and let's have a look at this footage. It's again coming from Red Bull, so thanks Red Bull that we are allowed to use that. And here is that short little thingy. What I didn't show you very much yesterday is how to mask stuff out, and here we can clearly see that we've got a moving object in here that should be masked out, and you can simply hit that button here, create mask, in order to create a mask, and then you just set a few points here and mask the guy out, including the shadow. That would help. By default, this mask is static. You can also see that there is no keyframe on here, but as soon as you go to the move tool and move one of the points, you see that a keyframe appears here, and now you can animate that mask. And I will do that by simply moving some of the points around also this one, and then also these here. And well, that's already looking quite nice. Let me just use these ones and move them here. Okay, so this mask is finished. There are a few other things that we need to mask out. So we create another mask and mask out the lake because there is some movement in the waves. And this has the potential to confuse the tracker. So we want to mask it out. Let's move 1 point to create a keyframe. And then let's go to the last frame, and I will hit Control A to select all of the points here and use the scale tool to scale it up a little bit. So here we go. That's the mask for our lake. And then, of course, we need to mask out the logo up here. And this is very thankful because we don't have to animate that. Just draw a shape, mask it out. And here we go. Now we can drag the shot. So we already set up the footage, so I will go to 2D tracking. And what I want to do here is I want to automatically track the whole thing. That's what I want to start now. And then let's say that I need some more information. Let's say maybe I took some measures from here to there, and I need that to be included in the solve or in the alignment in the end. Or I want the ground plane to be here in this front water spot. Then I need to add some manual trackers that allow me to define it as the ground plane. So let me do that. Next to the automatic tracking tab, there is a manual tracking tab, and this one comes with a list. And this list is empty right now. So what I want to do is, of course, creating a tracker. So sometimes when you control click, because that's what you have to do if you want to place a marker or if you want to create a tracker, nothing happens. And most of the time, you just need to deselect the motion tracker and select it again, and then it works. So let me just refine the tracker position. So you can refine it here, you can place it here, but you can also see that we've got this motion tracker track view here, which helps you fine-tune the track itself. And because we are at frame 0, we can just track forward. And now you see that this track follows this stone here perfectly. So the motion tracker track view, this window here, is always the window where you should really have a look at, because you can really see if the track is solid or not. Okay, now let's have a look at the list, and there is a new entry. First of all, there is the track name, and let's call this left because it's going to be the left tracker of the ones that I want to set. Then this is the size of the tracker itself, the inner area, and this is the size of the search area. You can also adjust it here. It's this one here. And then we can adjust the color filtering, but we will come to that later. We can make this shape here a circle, and we can lock it. And I will lock it for now because I'm happy with it. And then I'm going to create another tracker. Let's say I want to do that here. So I hold down Control or Command on Mac, and I set this tracker to be here. And yeah, just track forward. Okay, now it's finished. If we scrub through the timeline and have a look here, it's very solid. So let's call it red. And let's also lock this guy. And then we need a third one because we want to define a ground plane. And I want to create this here. So here we see that this is a good pattern to stick to. And let's track this. We rename it to be front. And let's scrub through the timeline. It's perfect. So let's lock it. So just in case you want to organize the tracks or the trackers here in the list a little bit more, you can always right click and create a new folder and just make the trackers a child of this folder. And this way you can fold them away or not, as you prefer. Okay, so now we've got two sets of trackers. We've got a bunch of auto trackers, and then we also have 3 manual trackers, and we want to use all of them for tracking. So what we can do is simply go to 3D Solve and run the 3D solver, and I will do that now. And while it is solving the shot, I will tell you that you always have to keep in mind that manual trackers are considered to be perfect by Cinema 4D. So Cinema 4D assumes that you really took some efforts to place these trackers and that they are trackers with no error. So it will prioritize them higher than the other ones. Okay, the solve is already finished. And now let's leave 2D navigation mode here. And let's align the scene, because that's what we did this for. If we expand the motion tracker here, you can now see that we don't just have the auto features, which are all of the nulls that have been created by the auto tracker. We also have the user features, which are the 3 nulls that we created here. So let's use them for aligning the shot. And to do that, I will select the motion tracker and I will create a point constraint and say that this is the pivot of the scene. And the next thing I want to do is I want to define the ground plane. For that, I use a planar constraint, and this planar constraint needs 3 nulls here to create the ground plane, and I will use my tracks here. Again, same as in the first session. It's a little bit tilted here, but it's good for now. So this is the y-axis, that's good. Now we just have to define the x-axis here, because we can also use one axis to define the length of it. So we create a vector constraint from here to there. We say that this is the x-axis and that we know the length of this one. So let's say we know the length. Let's expand that a little bit, and let's say the length is 1 meter. So this is this aligned and scaled scene now. And let me just show you that we can now place something inside here. So let's go to the content browser. And again, I did this in the first session as well. I'm gonna search for the horse, which is a sculpting preset. And I just double click it. And here is our horse. Now I can rotate it and place it somewhere here. Rotate it again. And if I now scrub through the timeline, you see that it's perfectly standing in the water. So here we go. That's manually assisted tracking, or auto tracking that is assisted by manual trackers. So you can combine them with ease, and that's what I wanted to show you in this example. Now, the next example that I want to show you is something that is not very beautiful, but it shows you some things that you need to watch out for. And I'm going to open my tester sequence here. And as I told you, it is not very beautiful. To be precise, it's not beautiful at all. And but it's showing a few cases that are very important to know. And the first thing I want to show you is an object moving on some sort of background. And one mistake that is made by many people, and I did that before as well, until someone told me that is not a good idea, which is to track corners. So let me jump back into the keynote and to that footage. And this is a perfect example. Back in the day, I would always have tried this corner here for tracking, but it's a bad idea. Why is that? Because the tracker works in 2 passes, and the first pass is the 2D tracking pass, which means the tracker doesn't have any idea of the 3D in this shot. It's just a 2D tracker, so it sees what it sees here, and it doesn't know any parallax and whatnot. So what we have here, if we hit play, if we track the corner, we've got this a part of the corner, or this part of the tracker being the same all the way, but all of the other parts aren't. So here in the background, there is the plants. Here, there's the grid, those metal things. And then here is the stone. So it changes all of the time. Instead of tracking corners, always track like patterns that are on the object so that they can be followed. And let me show you that in this example here. So I'm at frame 0 and I want to go to 2D tracking, manual tracking, and I will just create a tracker here. So let me just track forward and let's grab the timeline, and you see that it immediately loses track here. And this is because actually those 3 quarters here are the stuff that it actually tracks, because it's more relevant in this particular spot. You have to think about a 2D tracker like that. It tries to follow this particular pattern, and once it changes, it will lose it. So instead of tracking the corner here, track, for example, this spot here or this spot. If you do that, if I release the mouse, it will automatically recalculate. And now you see that it follows along perfectly. And you can also see that the background here drastically changes, and this is why it loses track. This is point 1. Never do that. Never track corners of objects, because we are in a 2D tracker, and the tracker doesn't know anything about the 3D structure of the scene yet. The second thing is this case here. We've got different spots here, and you can see them clearly. But if you want to track them, let me create a tracker here. And in this case, because it's a round shape, I'm also going to check circle. So we can track a circle. Let's make it a little bit smaller, something like that. And let's try to track this. I'm also going to track forward. And you can see that it follows a little while, but then it loses the track. Why is that? Because we can clearly see that this spot is green and the background is blue. Why does it not see the difference? And the answer to this is luminance. By default, every tracker tracks the luminance of the shot in here in Cinema 4D. So here you can see that the color filter is set to luminance, but we've got other options. Or before I show you the options, let me check tracker view here. This is a very powerful checkbox because it lets you see what the tracker actually sees. And if it's set to luminance, this is what it sees. And you see that there's not really a difference between this gray and this gray. And this is exactly why it loses the track. Instead, if I go here to green, now I track the green channel, and I can even go to enhanced green, then we've got a lot of contrast. And if I scrub the timeline now, because it automatically recalculates, this works perfectly. Same is here with red. Right now, it is completely gray. Let me set this up to be, in this case, enhanced red. And let's make it a circle. And yeah, just place it like that. So please always, if a tracker doesn't work immediately, try to find the right color filter first, because this can help you a lot. Okay, now we are tracking the red one. And here you see that we've got another special case, because sometimes you've got foreground objects and the spot that you want to track is in the background. So how can we solve this? Because once it reappears here, we want to make sure that Cinema 4D knows that this is exactly the same spot that we tracked on this side. So we go until here, and then we either right click and say trim track, or we just hit this little button, which is the very same, trim track. So let's click this, And now we told Cinema 4D to stop tracking that feature in the video. And then we go to this frame where it's completely back again. And then we just pick the tracker here and place it on the feature again. And what we can do now is we can hold down Shift, and once we release the mouse, the tracker will snap back into place and it will automatically continue tracking. Okay, let's have a look at this in the graph view. So yesterday I already showed you the graph view, and let me bring this tracker up. Where is it? Where's the tracker? Oh, that's something I never had before. Where is it? There we go. Okay, these are the 3 tracks that I created, the 3 trackers. And let me bring this up here. And then with this one selected, you can see that we go until here. And here we trim the track. That's why there is nothing in this gap here. And here we're starting to retrack the whole thing. And Cinema 4D still knows that this is the very same feature that we are tracking here. So this can be useful if you're going to track a feature that is in frame, but then you have a camera move and the feature is out of the frame, and then you move back and it's again in the frame. And this is how you would handle those situations. And then there is a third case, which is rotating patterns. But I will show you that in a scene that also covers something else, which is geometry assisted manual tracking. So let's go to manual tracking and let's load this footage here. Let's resample it to 50% and hit play so we see what we're dealing with. In this case, I don't have a camera in the scene. Well, I have a camera in the scene, but it's not moving. But what I want to track here is just the object. Right, how can I track that? So when it comes to object tracking, there are a few things to know. And the first thing is you don't need a camera solve before tracking objects. The second thing is you need a minimum of 7 trackers to solve the shot. So if I want to solve this object, I need to place at least 7 trackers, or 7 trackers need to be working all of the time, or need to be there at every frame in order to solve the shot, unless you work with geometry assisted tracking. So you can also use some geometry to assist you in the tracking. And then you just need 3 trackers. And I will show you now how you can do that. So we've got the motion tracker here. We go to 2D tracking, manual tracking. And then we start creating trackers. So here on this pattern, I will create the first one. It's the top left, at least in the beginning. And then I want to track this guy. So let me scrub through the timeline here. And at some point, it will just lose the track. Why is that? Because the pattern is clearly here. But the pattern is also changing a lot. And if I rotate this box by 90 degrees, so from here to there, all of the white spots will be black and all of the black spots will be white. So it's the maximum difference that you can have. And there are a few ways to handle that. The first one is that you could set more keyframes. So you could right click and insert a keyframe or key at the track position. Then you will get a little bit further, but it will lose the track here. So let's do that again. This time I will just click this button because it's the very same. I just wanted to show you that you can find it here as well, and so on. And you can go, well, until the end. Here you would then create another manual keyframe and so on. And here it loses it again. So that's a never-ending story. And again, What you can do instead is you can use virtual keyframes. That's this one here. So let me bring up the motion tracker graph view again. And here we see what we're actually doing. So every yellow thing is a keyframe. Then we are in good quality and it's getting worse. Then there's another keyframe, good quality at the first 2 frames. Then it's getting worse, keyframe, it's getting worse, and so on. And when we set virtual keyframes, Cinema 4D will support us with keyframes that it sets automatically. And there are some settings for that. The default mode is arrow threshold preemptive, but I tend to use arrow threshold exceeded because there is a better distribution between those keys. And now it works. So let's lock this track and let's go back to frame 0 and create another tracker here. And it already is sitting perfectly. This time I will immediately enable virtual keyframes, set them to arrow threshold exceeded, and track the frame. And this is what comes out. I just set 1 keyframe and the rest is done automatically. If I scrub the timeline, I have to be aware of the fact that because of the automatic setting of keyframes, this track can move a little bit to the side. And in this case, that wasn't happening. But if we track this one, well, at least I had it in the past with this one. So I will enable arrow threshold exceeded as a virtual keyframe mode and track forward again. And now, yeah, here you can see that we are not in the middle anymore. So what I would do now is here on the last frame, I move it back into place and I track backwards. And now if I scrub the timeline backwards, it seems like this is really solid. But there is one critical point, and you can see that here. Oh, sorry. You can see that here. The point is when the tracks meet here in the middle. So here you can see this one. Sorry, now it moved up. This one is coming from the left, and this one is coming from the right. So there could be a jump in here. And as you can see in the motion tracker track view, there is a jump. So let's just place it in the middle again and track into both directions. That's done manually here. And now we have to watch out for this part where the keyframes or the tracking sections meet. And this one, well, yeah, it's still moving. So this would be the workflow to get closer to a solid track. But this is always the danger when you work with manual trackers that have virtual keyframes. So now let's solve this whole thing. We've got 3 trackers already, and now I want to solve this shot or solve this object. In order to do so, I need the object tracker. This is the object tracker. You can find it also here. And in the object tracker, there is a tab called trackers. We need to populate that list with the trackers that we already created. So we go to the motion tracker and select all of them. And then we go to the object tracker and hit assign selected. And now the motion tracker knows, although they are still in here, that it doesn't, or that is not allowed to use those trackers for a camera solve, but just for the object tracker solve for this particular object tracker. If we go to reconstruction, run 3D solver for object is grayed out, so we cannot do that. We need to adjust 2 more things in order to do so. The first thing is we need to create a geometry object that we can use here as assistance. And the second thing is that we need the focal length because we don't have a camera solve yet, so we need to feed in a focal length. So let me jump into the motion tracker, and under 3D solve, I tell the motion tracker that the focal length is known and constant, and I will set it to 35 millimeters because that's pretty close to what my old iPhone did, and this was shot with that iPhone. So now I go back to the object tracker and I create an object, well, a cube here in that case. And what is important now is that the cube size here matches the size of the box. And it was around 6 by 11 by 6. Now let's jump out of 2D mode. And let's also go to the 4 views, because now we need to move this object a little bit back. Here we go. And we need to rotate it so that it lines up with the box that I'm holding in my hands. So it looks like this is a little bit too small. So we don't scale it up, but we move it closer to the camera. That's important here. And in order to see better what we're doing, I'm also going to change the display to lines. And now let's have a look. Well, we can still fine tune the rotation here like so. And this really needs to be accurate because we just have 3 trackers. And if you have a small mistake in here, it will break your solve somehow. So that's the danger when you just work with 3 trackers. I would rather track a few more features here on the video, but I want to show you that workflow. So here we go. Let's say that's perfect. Then I'm going to go to the object tracker again and drag and drop the cube into this spot here. And if I go to reconstruction now, you can see that we can now run the 3D solver. This will be very fast. It's already finished. And what it did was that it took those 3 features and shot rays at them and tried to find the intersection with this geometry object. And now if I move, or if I scrub through the timeline, you can see that the nulls here already move, but the cube doesn't. And the reason for that is that the new movement is now stored here in the object tracker, and we need to make the cube a child of the object tracker. And now it will follow along. So as you can see, it was a little bit inaccurate, and that's why we are having a little bit of offset here now. But in general, that's the workflow. All right. Are there questions so far? Otherwise, I would directly jump into.
There's a couple. We've had a few questions about exporting tracker data to other programs, and Darren's been covering those. But there's a key one that Julian asked, which I wanted to just have your opinion on, which was, anecdotally, he's heard that triangles are useful as trackers. So instead of black squares, he's just curious if there are any good rules of thumb on this point.
Yes and no. It depends on the tracker. I think that some of the standalone motion trackers are able to understand rotation in the trackers. Cinema 4D's motion tracker doesn't. So if you want to track something inside of Cinema 4D, be careful with pattern trackers, so to speak. So in this case, this checkerboard is giving me a hard time. Actually, the better way to prepare this asset here, the box, to be tracked would be just to paint some dots on it, because then if I rotate it, I don't have to take care of the rotation because it's pretty much the same pattern no matter how you rotate it. So that's actually a mistake I made when I prepared this asset, but now I use it for this demo, and it makes sense again, but only because I use it for this demo.
Great. A quick question about the box, by the way. Edward's asking, when you match the cube, do you have to be doing it on the first frame?
No. You can also do it here, or maybe let me see. This would also have been a good spot, because I see all 3 sides here. Maybe that would have been even better. I'm pretty sure that it would have been better. You don't have to do that on the first frame.
Got it.
But the moment you do that, no, it should work. It should just work. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
All right, so now we've got actually 20 minutes left, but I know that I need a minimum of 30 minutes from now on to break down. Oh, sorry. Let's go back. Sorry. Here we go. This is a shot that I created a few weeks ago, and it was a lot of fun to do that because it is a combined track, and I actually never did that before. So I gave it a try, and it worked out really well. So what we have here is some camera movement, and in addition to that, we have an object moving in the scene, and I wanted to interact the object or parts of the object with the rest of the scene. So I have a reason to do a combined track. And this is what came out, and I want to guide you through the process. And I will spend most of the time on showing you how I tracked it. But in order to save some time, I will directly jump into this scene here where I already prepared the masks. So if I play this back, you can see that I already created a mask, and this mask is moving with the shot. Then there is a second mask here coming in when the hand is in there. And yeah, in the end, everything that doesn't need to be tracked for the camera solve is yeah, just masked out. You can also see that this area here has got a lot of structure, and this area here doesn't. So I placed markers here, and now I will just show you the automatic tracking stuff. So I can just create the 2D tracking here and auto track this forwards and backwards. And it's a very fast process, so I will let it run through that. Again, this is a 2D tracking path, so it doesn't know anything about 3D information of the scene. It tries to follow 2D patterns. So it tries to follow this guy here, this guy, this pattern here, maybe this one. And it also tries to follow my manual trackers. And in the end, this is a quite solid thing. So here we go. It just takes a little bit more. But in the end, I want to show you how this all looks. So here we go. And you can see that the trackers are very or almost homogeneous distributed here on this area. And here, it really tried to stick to the markers that I created. And again, I said it earlier, always try to track the third dimension. And if I would just have tracked this plane here, that would just be 2 dimensions. But because I have got this these trackers here as well, I added the third dimension to this track, and this helps a tracker. It's not mandatory, but it helps. Okay, so I can directly go into the 3D solve here, but I will skip that step and directly jump into the file where everything is solved. Again, just to save some time. And here, yeah, I already created a plane here with the checkerboard in the alpha to check if the track is solid, and it's incredibly solid, which I'm really happy about. And I already aligned the scene here. Let me just make this plane invisible. I used the point constraint here or position constraint to define the scene origin. I used the planar constraint to define the ground floor for the scene, and I used the vector constraint to define the x-axis here, and also to type in my measures. And I measured this distance here, and it was pretty exactly 70 centimeters. So I put that into this field here. And taking the measures is especially important when you combine a track, because now if I track this one, and I will do that next, I need to align this as well, and I need to take or need to type in the measures here as well. And if those two measures don't match, also the track won't match. But let me, or the solve won't match. So let me show how I created the manual trackers for this. I go to 2D tracking, or I will just lock the solved data. It's already solved, it's already locked. So let's directly jump into 2D tracking, then manual tracking. Here is the empty list again. We need to go to 2D tracking mode, and let's see if the tracker now appears. Here we go. We make this a little bit smaller and just track bidirectional. And if we are happy with that, we double check here. Well, that's looking good. Here it loses the track, so I will just set another keyframe. It processes the rest, and now it's already fine. And then I rename this. This is the top left, and I also lock this. And this is what I would do now with all of the others as well, but I don't want you to watch me doing that. So I prepared it, and here we go. Now this is, the scene with the manual trackers in place. If I have a look at these, it's 9 of them. So every single marker here got one tracker. This one is a little bit special because the center of this marker has been covered by my hand here. So I rather tracked this corner because then I didn't have to bother with this. Okay. Right, now we are actually done with the manual work here, and we can directly solve this object. So let's create another object tracker. Before, I will just select all of the trackers here because we have to bring them over to the object tracker. So create the object tracker, and in the trackers section, just assign the selected trackers. This time, because we have 9 and we need at least 7 not to be forced to use geometry assisted tracking. Now we can leave this field out here, as I said, because we have got enough trackers, and we can directly go into reconstruction, and we can directly run 3D solver for this object. Also, because in the motion tracker, we already solved the camera, and this is why we already have information about the focal length. So let's solve this object. And the 3D solver is running, and it's doing pretty much the same as with the camera solve. So it compares the 2D tracks and tries to find some parallax, and based on the parallax that it finds or that it detects, it will solve the object. And now it's already finished. So let me jump out of 2D tracking mode, and let's also go to the move tool because I want to see this axis here. Let's scrub through the timeline. And this is what we have. Not too bad. Okay, let me align this. So we will go, we will select the object tracker, and then we will create a position constraint and say this here, this one is the center of the object. Then again, we will create a planar constraint, and we will use, let's say, these 3 to define the plane. But in this case, I don't want to have the ground plane. I want this to be the plane that points towards Z or Z. So let's change this to be Z. Now it's blue because blue is the color for Z. And then I'm going to create another vector constraint and go from here to there. Tell Cinema 4D that this is the x-axis and that I also know the length because I took the measures. And let's now just type in 18. It's not exactly 18, but I will show you something with that. And now the whole thing is solved. We can also log the solved data here, and let's have a look. Let's also bring this back. Oh, one thing I see is that the axis is not aligned the way I want it to be. So I want the Y to point up and Z going to the back. So let me see if we can adjust that here. No, that's not the right one. Let's go to the planar constraint and reverse the axis here. That's what I want. Okay, so now let me just continue by going to the side view, and let's have a look at this guy here, because here we can see if it moves or not. Actually, it should be as calm as possible. It is already pretty calm, but for example, if you go to the vector constraint here, and let's say you type in 21, the solve will be different. And if I scrub the timeline here, you can see that although it shouldn't move until frame 120 or so, it moves. And this is because the wrong measurement here. If I bring that to 17.8, which was something that I was quite happy with, it is very still. There's a little bit of jittering, but it's good enough to solve the shot. Okay, so let's continue. Now I want to show you how I created the dynamic setup for this whole thing. And I started by creating a plane. And I made this really small, like 10 by 10, and height and width segments are just 1. And then I'm going to align this towards Z. And I'm going to make it a child of the object tracker. And I'm going to zero it out. So I'm going to reset the PSR coordinates. And now it's in the middle here. Okay, so that's looking quite good, or quite promising. So let me see if I can take this a little bit further. I will make it bigger. Here we can already see that we are not centered. And I will also rotate it a little bit, like so. Let's make sure that the bottom line matches. Okay, that's looking quite good. Yeah, let's do it like that. And if we scrub the timeline, yeah, that's perfect. All right, now let's make this plane editable, because we want to create the room out of this. So I will call it a room. And then I select this polygon, and I will extrude it. D is the shortcut for extrude, by the way. And I will extrude it to, well, let's say, yeah, 10 centimeters is actually enough. Let's go with 10 centimeters. And I'm also gonna use Control A to select all polygons, and the shortcut UR to inverse the normals here. And now we are pretty good to continue. So one thing I also did, because I think that was very good for seeing what's going on, is when I was in startup layout, I selected the motion tracker, went to the footage tab, and created a background object, because this also gave me a texture here with the video footage inside. Then I created a copy of this and called this Luma. And then I copied the color information here over into the luminance channel, and I applied it to the room. Now it looks like that. And there are a few things that we can set up here in the tag. And one of them is that a texture doesn't need to be visible on both sides inside of Cinema 4D. So you can just make it visible on the front, so it's not on the back side here of a polygon, or just on the back. And now if I set up the projection to be frontal, it suddenly somehow, well, disappears, because it is the same texture than the background. And now I can scrub the timeline here, and it looks like it's just this cube or this room inside of the image frame. So let me also activate screen space and occlusion, and maybe let's set it up to be just 3 centimeters or so. And also let's get rid of the user features here. So this is our way to go. Very cool. Now let me show you how I created the dynamic setup for this shot. So I started, well, in the end, I wanted to have the guitar amplifiers in here. And I just created a cube or as a placeholder, as a proxy, and made it 4x3x2, for example. And then I cloned it using a cloner, and I hold down Alt as I create that with the cube selected, because then the cloner will immediately be created as a parent object. Let's adjust the size here as well to 4x3x2, and then we want 5 clones in X directions, 5 clones in Y direction, and 1 clone in Z direction. And the next thing I want to do is to scale the whole cloner, but without the clones. And I can do that by holding down 7 while as I scale. So in case you didn't know that, that's a very good tip. And then with this wall of amplifier proxies, I just made that child of the room here, and reset PSR, because then it is immediately aligned correctly. Then I can put that out of here and just leave the camera. Here we go. And have a look at this. So first of all, let me push this backward like so. And then let's also try to align it to the ground as good as possible. Something like here. So this is our starting point for the dynamic simulation. Right now you can see, well, here you can see that it all follows along, but now we want to add the dynamics. So let's create a simulation tag, which is going to be a rigid body tag. And then for the room, I will also create a simulation tag, which is going to be the collider body tag. And then if I press play, you see that a few things happen. First of all, somehow this jumps up, and the second thing is that it falls back. And at this point, I want to set up the dynamics for the scene. So if we have this, and unfortunately now it doesn't fall over to the back too much because the room is not deep enough, so to speak. So let's increase that. So here we go. Now they are falling, and if we have a look through the editor camera, we can see that this is the 2 centimeter side of the amp, and then there is a gap of 1 centimeter down here. So there is some sort of collision margin, and it's actually called collision margin. And we can set that up in the document settings. So let's go to Edit, Project Settings, and then we go to the Dynamics tab and to Export. And here we've got the collision margin, and it is set to 1 centimeter. So let me bring this down to 0.01. And the scale, this is actually the average scale of the objects in the simulation. Let's use a value of 3. So let's go back and let's have a look. It's already looking better, but there's a little bit of jittering in here, so we need more accuracy in the calculation of the dynamics, and this can be set up here in the steps per frame. So instead of having 5 steps per frame, we bring this up to 10, and the maximum solver iterations per step is going to be 20. And now you can see that this is pretty solid. So the last thing we need to take care of is gravity. By default, gravity points directly down. And our room here is a little bit tilted. So it's like, well, it's like this, but gravity goes down. That's why the amps fall down. So let me get rid of the gravity, and the gravity setting for the scene can be found in the general tab of the dynamics in the project settings. Let's bring this down to 0. Now there is no gravity in the scene. This can also be cool if you do something with soap bubbles or so, or in outer space, we don't have any gravity. So this is also pretty cool, but not what we want here. So let's go back, and instead of the default gravity, we need to set our own gravity, and we can do that by going to simulate forces gravity, because this is a dedicated gravity object. And what we can do with that is we can make it a child of the room, reset its PSR, and then it's not pointing exactly downwards, but exactly downwards in image frame space. So now, if I hit play, the amps are standing still, and now if I move, nothing happens. Why is that? I had some trouble finding that out, but in the end, I learned that if you're running a simulation and it's standing still for, I think it was 2 seconds, it will turn off the dynamics, because it assumes that the dynamic simulation is finished. So there are 2 ways to to go on with that. In that case, the way I initially used was I created another object and made it a collider, but not with this collider body tag, but with the ghost body tag, because this will detect collisions, but it will not actually collide with objects. So that's why it's a ghost body. And I made an animation and just wiggled it around, so there was constant collision going on, and that's why the simulation didn't stop. But in the end, I found a more efficient way to do that, because actually here in the beginning, we don't need dynamics at all. This should just stand still. So what I did is, in the dynamics tab of the dynamics tag, I deactivated dynamics and set a keyframe. And then I scrubbed through the timeline until the first move of the image frame, and then I enabled the dynamics and set another keyframe. And this way, I ended up with something like that. So here we go. Very cool. Yeah, that's working perfectly. Okay, so one thing that is missing is a collider here for that space. So let me create another plane. Let's make it 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter. Oh, that's the segments, sorry. It's just a plane. That's why it just has 2 dimensions. All right, yeah, let me scale this so we have the right proportions. We can make it like that and move it to the edge here, because once they reach the edge, they should fall down. And then we make this plane another collider. So here we go. This is our setup. But in the middle, there's going to be one problem, which is this collider intersecting with the cubes here. So what I did about that is, again, I disabled the dynamics in the beginning, like so. And then I had a look at this here until there is no intersection anymore. Let's say frame 160, and then I set a keyframe again for enabled dynamics. So now what we come up with is this. I will just make the plane invisible. And here is our simulation. Yeah, that's looking cool. So now you see already that I've got the object here, that I've got the camera solve here, because these objects here are lying on the scene ground. Okay, now let's cache this animation. And there are actually 2 ways of caching it. And the more obvious way is also the bad way, which would be going to this or selecting this dynamics tag, go to cache, and just bake the object. But we are working with proxies here. In the end, I want to go to the content browser, type in amp, and here we've got the amplifiers. Those are the two that I actually used, and later I want to replace these proxies by the amps. So yeah, I need to find a way that I can bake this and in the end, yeah, replace the object with something else. This tag doesn't allow me to do so. It will completely mess up the baked dynamics. So instead, I right-click, go to MoGraph tags, and create a MoGraph cache tag, and bake this instead. And now I've got the baked animation, but what I can do here is I can simply replace these objects with another object. So I could create another cube here. I won't do this with the amp right now because it is just too heavy and it will slow down the scene a lot. Yeah, let's go with this, and I will just move this cube out and this cube in, and now we see as we scrub through the timeline that the simulation is capped, but we've got other objects in here. And this is an easy way to replace the child objects or the children of the clone. Okay, so now let me jump into After Effects, and I want to show you the breakdown of the After Effects project, unless there are any questions.
No, we've had a couple of questions about some of the technical settings, but Darren's picked those up. I won't delay you, Jonas, because I know we're slightly overrunning. So thank you everyone for bearing with us. But yeah. I think you'd be pleased at this next bit. And this, by the way, is the project file that Jonas has kindly shared that you'll get as the download link.
Yeah, here we go. This is the After Effects file that I shared. So you can download that and dive into it. So let me break this down a little bit. So we're starting with the 3D data that I exported from Cinema 4D, or rather than exporting it, I created a reduced scene with just the necessary 3D data in it, and yeah, extracted the 3D data via the Cineware plugin, and this way I got this here. You can see that there's also a light source in here that is called shine. So I want to use Trapcode shine to create some shininess based on that light here. Then there is the music group. This is the layer that I rendered out of Cinema 4D. So here we go. This is the original rendering. On top of that, I have got a reflection, and it is not always visible. And let me, yeah, here you can see the reflection. And let me show you the layer that I rendered out of Cinema 4D that shows that. So, oh, wrong time slider. So here we go. So this is our reflection, and there's more reflection and more reflection. And you can see that the background is not matching the foreground. And this is because I rebuilt the scene with simple geometry and projected the cupboard or shelf onto that geometry in order to have something to be reflected in here. And if we go to this frame, for example, you see that this is actually the edge of that surface here. And you can also see, again, wrong slider, that the amps are reflected in this one. Okay, so let's jump back into the composition. And the next thing is a dust layer. So let's go back here. We've got a dust layer and another dust layer on top of that with slightly different settings. So here we go. This just adds a little bit more depth to the whole shot. And actually, that's something you always need to keep in mind when you do 3D. It's very easy to make something look clean and new, but you always need to add some extra detail, some extra dirt to make it look more realistic. And in this case, that was my approach to add some accuracy to the shot, more or less. So let me go further, because the next layer is an adjustment layer. Let me go to this frame, which is actually perfect to showing what I do here. The adjustment layer contains just one effect, which is chromatic displacement. And this chromatic displacement appears in those areas where the amps go from inside to the outside. So we've got a switch in the dimension they are in, so to speak, and I want to underline this by using the chromatic displacement here. But then on top of that, there is the wireframe here. And the wireframe is a composition made of multiple things. Actually, the grid itself is just an After Effects 3D layer, but then I did some stuff to it, and I can show you what I did. So, oh wait, I wanted to show you that in another one, I guess. Yeah, okay, so that's just the grid. And another thing that is very cool is the mask that I use for the grid, because this is something I created with fields. And it's actually a vertex map on a plane that detects the objects falling through it, and then adding some slight decay with some noise in it. So if we scrub through the timeline here, it's not very impressive, but the effects that you can do with that, or do with that using it as a mask, are really cool, or can be really cool. So here's the wireframe border. It's this layer, and this is actually what I wanted to show you. So what we have here is just this border, or just this this path that I showed you. Then I added some Gaussian blur to blur it a little bit. Then some colorama to create those edges here. And after that, I added Trapcode Shine. And in Trapcode Shine, I used this 3D light back here that I exported from Cinema 4D as the source for the shine direction. And then I tinted it so that it's a little bit desaturated. The next thing is the image frame. That's the real footage that's on top of it now. And then I added some more things, like, for example, the amps outside. So this is the amps outside. And if we go to the last frame, you can clearly see that they don't really integrate that well because there are no shadows. So I rendered the shadows in a separate pass and just added them. So this is the shadows. And now it looks really convincing and like they are really integrated in the scene. And then there is another thing, which is a little bit of outlining here. So if I enable these two layers, you can see that there are a few outlines in here. So it's electrifying this effect somehow. So I just wanted to add something to that effect of breaking through the glass. And then in the end, you can see it down here. The shadow layer overlaps my hand, and I didn't want to just remove that in the shadow pass. So I created another layer out of the footage and created a roto brush layer out of that. So I just have the hand here and a little bit of extra stuff that is not doing anything here, anything bad. So I added this on top, also to bring back a little bit of the thumb here. And that's basically the full composite. But one of the exciting parts here is how I removed the trackers. So let me show you that workflow as well. So let me use the image frame moth here and create a new comp out of it. And let's make it very short, like 2 seconds, and trim the comp to the work area. And then there is some cool effect that I will bring up here, which is Spot Clone Tracker, which is part of VFX Suite. And what Spot Clone Tracker actually does, it's like a stamp in Photoshop, or a repair brush rather, because its method is set to repair. So what it can do is you set an area that you want to override with something that is inside of this area. Let me make the spot size a little bit smaller, and let's bring them closer together and zoom in. And here is something that I find very useful. If you disable the effect, you still got the gizmo here, and you can place it directly on top of the marker. And then you enable it again, and you just drag forward, and this will take a while. This is a 2D track, and well, at least I think it's a 2D track. I might be corrected by Simon on this, but in the end, it's tracking this spot here.
Yes, it's based on a point tracking technology, so you're absolutely right. It's 2D tracking.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what I meant. Point tracking. So it's not a planar track. It's a point track. Okay, so now we are almost done with this. Let me just run it through the whole sequence, and now we zoom out a little bit and press play, and you see, wow, the marker is gone. And this is basically what I did with all of the markers. And now one last thing that I want to show you is how I got rid of the blue screen here. And there is one funny thing, because I used Primet here. This is a very capable keyer, and I started by just selecting the background and then refining it and so on. And when I prepared this webinar, I found another button, which was this one, Auto Define Key. And I was like, let's just hit this button, and boom, it's all in one click. So let me zoom in. Let me also, that's what I like to do always, go to the view options and not show the comp, but the matte. And here we see that it did a great job, but there are a few things that can be improved. For example, there's a little bit of gray in here, and there's also a little bit of gray here. So we need to use the clean background tool in order to get rid of this gray here. And I always like to use the rectangle sampler here. So I do that, and now this is black. And then I use the clean foreground tool and just do this and that. And now it's finished. So I can go back to the comp setting here, or to the comp display, and maybe shrink the matte a little bit. I think a value of 40 was quite good. And then also create a soft edge here a little bit. Okay, that's pretty cool, but how can I get rid of these trackers here? Well, of course, I can draw a mask and then key it every second frame or every 10 frames. Or I just go to the music room here, and I copy over the 3D data, like so. And now I've got the 3D data in here. So what I can do with this is actually, I can create a new solid. Make this solid a 3D layer, parent it to the null picture frame, and then bring the position data up and zero it all out, and do the same with the orientation, zero it all out, and then I scale down the whole layer to, let's say, 1 or 2%, and yeah, just scale it as I need it, like so. Maybe I need a little bit of rotation, but you get the basic idea. Here we go, and then we move it a little bit in X direction. Now we have to be very careful because we are pretty low on scale. That's actually something to be optimized. But here we go. If we just move this now, you can see that it automatically follows, and we can just use this as the tracking mask, as an alpha matte inverted. And oh, that was the wrong layer. Here, we need to choose that. And now we got rid of everything. So that's basically the workflow. And let me jump back into the keynote. That's everything I have. So here we go. That's just the promo for Friday's webinar. If you didn't sign up already, on Friday, we're going to talk about scene reconstruction, and I'm going to break down this shot here with the crystal growth. All right. Are there any more questions, by the way?
Great stuff, by the way, Jonas. Really, really good. And so many fantastic techniques in there. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And also thank you so much for sharing the project file. That's so useful to be able just to have a poke around it and see how you set it up.
Yeah.
And we did have one quick last question from, here we go, from Antonio, just about how you exported the 3D data from Cinema to After Effects.
Okay, so let me jump into Cinema 4D. And what I did basically was I reduced the whole scene to the bare minimum. Actually, let me have a look at the collected file here, because in the footage, I think, oh, where is it? Where is it? I think there is a file that is called 3D data. Let me search for it. 3D data in this one. Yeah, here we go. So let's open this up. This is actually the scene that I used for exporting the data. So here you can see the camera move is in there. You can see the shine light back here. And here you can also see that we've got a null here in the middle of the picture frame. And this has got an external compositing tag. And the plane on the ground also has got an external compositing tag. So these two objects will be brought over to Cinema 4D. In addition to the light, we don't need an external compositing tag for that, because lights as well as cameras will be brought over automatically. For everything else that you want to bring over, you need this external compositing tag. And now if I go back to After Effects, and let me go to the project. It is somewhere linked here. Here, Music Room 3D Data. We can just create a new comp of that. And now you see that this is the preview for this scene. And what we can do now is we can just extract the scene data here. And once I do that, I have the 3D data inside. So you see that we've got the nulls in here, that we've got the light, and also the camera. That's how we bring this over.
Absolutely, that's the key detail. That's the fantastic magic bit.
Yeah.
Brilliant. We had a couple of questions about the signing up for tomorrow's session. So can I just grab the screen from you, because I want to share that PDF again?
Yes, you can, but I just want to mention that it's not possible to sign up for tomorrow's session, because the other sessions are running on Friday.
I meant Friday. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Usually we run these Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but yes, you're absolutely right. We're running this Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday this week. So yes, I know I got that wrong on the earlier session as well, didn't I?
Yeah.
Easily done.
Here we go. Now you get the screen.
Thank you. So this is great. This is the PDF that you may have used to sign up with, and on here are the correct dates. So here's the sessions today. This is the one we're on, 24th, Wednesday, and the one tomorrow is the one where we're going to watch Jonas do the scene reconstruction from this amazing crystallization element stuck to the tree. And here it is, Friday. So it's correct on the link.
Yeah.
There we go. So excellent. If you got any questions, if you don't get any of the automatic links by email, please let us know. It's training@maxon.net, and we can organize getting that over to you. Same with the project file, but you should receive shortly an email automatically with all this detail too, plus the link to this PDF if you haven't got it. Great. So thanks again for joining us, and thank you also behind the scenes to Darren for organizing the questions and answering those so diligently. Really appreciate that too.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Darren.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And also, thank you again, Jonas. It's great that you're sharing all your experience and these little tricks, packing all this information into such a short time. So thank you again.
You're welcome. I'm here to help.
Excellent. Great. Okay, we'll see you all soon on the next one. But thanks again for your time.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry for overrunning, but I think everyone could get something out of that. So I think it was worth it, hopefully.
That's all right. All right. Thanks again, guys. See you soon.
Okay.
Right, cheers.
Bye, guys.